I thought I was the biggest fan of Tyson Fury out there. I followed Tyson from the beginning. I followed him well before the Derek Chisora Channel 5 televised fight where the mainstream boxing fan became involved in his career. I thought I was the biggest fan of Tyson Fury out there till I met Ruben, who's a regular viewer of the channel. Ruben has a Tyson Fury mouse mat and is going to get a tattoo of him if he beats Wladamir Klitschko in their fight this October. So I wouldn't go that far. I'm certainly not as big a fan as Ruben, but let's say I've been following Tyson Fury from the start and I'm a huge supporter of his. I also think that he is a very, very competitive selection in terms of his fight against Wladamir Klitschko. And whilst I view it as a competitive fight, I am slightly favouring Tyson Fury in this one. I feel, and I won't go into my reasons for this selection in this video because I've covered that in past videos and I'll cover it again in future videos. But essentially I feel that he's more well-rounded. He's a young fighter. I think Klitschko's towards the autumn of his career. I think Klitschko's quite predictable. I don't think he's got as much versatility as Tyson Fury. I don't think there's as many tools in the Klitschko armoury. And I think he'll struggle to deal with a big man who's such a good mover and equally adept on the outside and the inside. Anyway, I'll park Klitschko versus Fury for the purposes of this video, as that's not what I'm here to discuss. I'm here to discuss being an all-time great. Now, in my opinion, Wladamir Klitschko is an all-time great heavyweight. I think it is hard to convincingly argue that Wladamir Klitschko is not a top 10 heavyweight of all time. Now, you'll get some hardcore boxing nuts who will come up with a list of heavyweights from the 18th century. A list of heavyweights that neither they nor I have ever seen box. A list of heavyweights who you'd have to read the newspapers back in the day. The truth is, when I talk about all-time greats, I'm talking about fighters from the televised era. I'm talking about fighters where we can actually assess their skill set and assess their capability and assess the level of opposition that they've been in with. And for me, based on that criteria, Wladamir is definitely a top 10 heavyweight. He's a long way away from the greatest heavyweight. I'd have him behind the likes of Ali, Fraser, Foreman, Lewis, Tyson, those sort of guys. I know there's other names people throw in there as well. Sonny Liston, Joe Louis, Evander Holyfield. I'm probably missing a few obvious ones as well. But the purpose of this video is not to necessarily go through my top 10 all-time greats. What I would say is Wladamir Klitschko's up there. He's not greatest of all time. He's not in that conversation. But he's in the discussion of top 8, top 9, top 10, top 11, top 12 heavyweights of all time. 10 years undefeated, one of the longest spells as heavyweight champion out there. I think he's second, and he may well surpass that, if he can get past Tyson Fury. A guy who has been undefeated for over a decade. A guy who has absolutely ruled the roost and been number one for so long, barring only his brother. A guy who's fought all comers, the amount of undefeated fighters that Klitschko's taken on, even in recent memory, Pulev, Povetkin, Jennings, time and time again fighting undefeated fighters, time and time again fighting established big names in the sport, guys like David Haye, Tony Thompson, Sam Peter. Wladamir Klitschko is a really, really good fighter. It is fair to say he doesn't have a single career-defining victory in the sense that Lewis beat Tyson, Lewis beat Holyfield. There's no rumble in the jungles on Wladamir Klitschko's resume. It's fair to say that Wladamir Klitschko has probably never beaten an all-time great. But at the end of the day, Wladamir Klitschko was born on the date he was born, and he could only fight the heavyweights that were available during his 10, 12 years at the top. And in my opinion, he's fought all of them. He's developed a style which may upset some boxing fans, may not be the most aesthetically pleasing, but is ruthlessly efficient. He's an elite defensive fighter in my opinion. The way he can close down fighters on the inside, the way he keeps his guard and defenses tight from the outside, that lead left hook, that straight right hand, the power, the athleticism. And I mean, don't forget, this isn't a guy without amateur background or technique. This is a guy with an Olympic gold medal. He's an athlete. He's a great mover for a man of his size. And whilst he has some weaknesses, they haven't been exposed by any heavyweight. Wladamir is a headhunter. He doesn't punch to the body. Wladamir doesn't fight on the inside. Wladamir doesn't have the greatest punch variety. Wladamir probably doesn't have the greatest chin, as we saw earlier on in his career. But he's developed a style that hides all of these inefficiencies, and it's allowed him to completely dominate. I mean, you've got to say, in my opinion, that the fact he was stopped earlier on in his career possibly needs to be forgotten about in terms of assessing him as an all-time great and looking back at his resume. The truth is that the way Wladamir Klitschko was fighting a dozen years ago doesn't necessarily represent the disciplined, well-oiled machine that Emmanuel Stewart created when it comes to the ring at present. The present version of Vlad, the Vlad who dispatched of Kubrat Pulev, the Vlad who dominated Alexander Povetkin, is in my opinion an all-time great. Top 10 heavyweight of all time, probably with a deeper resume than his brother. I know people say Vitaly might have won in a head-to-head, but I'd say Vlad's got the deeper resume. He doesn't have the chin of his brother, but he's probably got better knockout power. He's probably a better athlete. Anyway, now a lot of the fighters Wladamir has fought over the course of his career, they've been respectable, they've been undefeated, they've been the top of the division, but none of them had the potential to be an all-time great. Let me expand on that. A guy like David Haye was one of the top fighters in the division when he fought Wladamir Klitschko. He was one of the most exciting fighters out there. But realistically, we knew that going into that fight, David Haye was most likely not an all-time great heavyweight. We'd seen him already suffer a loss in his career. Not that that's necessarily relevant to being an all-time great, but the manner of that loss suggested that he would likely not go down as an all-time great. We'd seen him struggle to an extent with Nikolai Valuev. I still think it's very questionable whether David Haye won that fight. My point is, David Haye was a very, very good fighter. He was a very good competitor for Wladimir to take on. He represented near the top of the division when Wladimir fought him. But in all honesty, even had David Haye won that fight, even had he landed the haymaker on Vlad and knocked out the Ukrainian early on, I didn't see David Haye going on to be an all-time great. He didn't have that potential. Kubrat Pulev is another one. An amazing amateur background, A guy who was undefeated in the pros. A guy who was 6'5", 6'6", an excellent technician. But to my eye, when he fought Vlad, again, it was fairly clear that we weren't looking at a guy here who was going to be an all-time great. I watched his fights against the likes of Alexander Ustinov and felt that he lacked power. I watched his fight against Tony Thompson and thought, had Thompson been a year or two younger, a year or two fitter, a year or two more motivated, I think Thompson may have got the better of him on that occasion. But frankly, I saw weaknesses to Pulev's game. I didn't see him having enough power. I didn't see him being dynamic enough to be an all-time great. Even if he'd landed phantom punch on Wladamir Klitschko and got the win that night, I didn't go into that fight excited that we were on the verge of seeing a historic event. And I didn't go into that fight thinking that this could be a real passing of the torch moment and we could be about to witness the next all-time great heavyweight. Now, a lot of people would say the best opponent Wladimir Klitschko's faced is Povetkin. I know that's up for debate. There's various contrasting views, but Povetkin would probably be the consensus. And again, I have to say the same thing about Povetkin. We'd seen Povetkin in fights with the likes of Marco Huck, Ruslan Chagayev. Povetkin looked a very handy fighter, don't get me wrong. But were we seeing greatness in Povetkin's work? Heavy-handed, certainly. But in an age of the mega heavyweights who are 6'6", 6'7", 6'8", were we really looking at Povetkin as an all-time great? As someone who could potentially go on to dominate the division for years. My point is, arguably Wladimir Klitschko's 3 best wins, the David Haye, Povetkin and Pulev. All 3 of them represented the very top of the heavyweight division when Wladimir Klitschko fought them. All 3 of them were exciting fights. But at no time did I feel like we were on the verge of witnessing history. We were on the verge of the birth of a new king, the birth of a new champion, a guy who's going to go down in the history books. Now with Tyson Fury, it's slightly different. And I'm not getting ahead of myself here. I'm not saying Tyson Fury is an all-time great. I'm not saying that by Tyson Fury beating Wladimir Klitschko, he'll become an all-time great. Now Wladimir Klitschko is an all-time great, but simply by knocking out an all-time great, you do not become one of the top 10. Just in the same way that Oliver McCall, Buster Douglas, Hasim Rahman aren't in the top 10. A freak win over an all-time great does not necessarily lead to you becoming an all-time great. But my point is, Tyson Fury, 6'9", undefeated, in his mid-20s, has serious upside. In my opinion, he has a lot more upside than Pulev, Povetkin and Haye when they went to fight Wladimir Klitschko. And I really think that this is a passing of the torch moment. I don't rule Wladimir Klitschko out of this fight. He's very live. He could knock Fury out. He really could. I wouldn't rule out Wladimir points either. What I'm saying is that this fight has the potential to be a historic moment. This fight has the potential to be a passing of the torch, where we see the crowning of a champion who could be dominant for many years. This fight has the potential to be a matchup like Vitaly Klitschko versus Lennox Lewis, a matchup that isn't truly appreciated until a decade after it's happened. When that fight went down, nobody realised that we were arguably witnessing the top 2 heavyweights of a generation squaring off against each other. And in 10 years' time, it is at this stage conceivable that this fight could be the same. Because Tyson Fury has shown such improvement, and he's shown so many different gears to his game, that if he beats Wladimir Klitschko at this stage of his career, with so many years left in the tank, he could be a dominant champion for many, many years to come. Many years to come. He's not like Kubrat Pulev or Povetkin, who fought Wladimir Klitschko when they were in their 30s. He's not looking like Kubrat Pulev, who maybe laboured over to victory against Tony Thompson. Fury's getting better and better and better. His last few performances have been by far the best of his career. The improvements have been vast. The ability to fight southpaw, the new discipline, the defensive awareness, the improvements have been absolutely vast. And for such a big man, he's 25, 26 years old, he's probably only just fully growing into his frame. Tyson Fury is probably going to peak later than most heavyweights because of his size, which is actually a scary thought given how advanced he is already. My point is that Tyson Fury has a shot at greatness. The guys I've mentioned in this video, Kubrat Pulev In my opinion, by the time he got to fight Wladamir Klitschko, he could never have been an all-time great. Pulev-Klitschko was never going to be a fight where we could look back on it in 10 years' time and say, wow, that was the moment the legend Kubrat Pulev was born. Because we'd already seen limitations and weaknesses in the Pulev game, which meant he could never hit those heights. Now, certain people will be laughing at me at home saying, haven't you forgotten about the Steve Cunningham fight? You know, you're saying that you saw weaknesses in Pulev's game, which means Pulev couldn't be an all-time great. How did you miss when Fury got put flat on his arse by a cruiserweight? Let me answer that, and let me answer that directly. Fury showed ill discipline as a young fighter. But he learned from it, he got up, he showed heart, he won the fight. He won the fight and he turned it around swiftly after that incident. Now let me say, Wladamir Klitschko is an all-time great, despite being stopped 3 times in his career, early on. I would suggest that it is conceivable that Fury's mistakes early in his career, the Nevin Piket's knockdown, the Steve Cunningham knockdown, are perhaps lesser evils than the Wladamir Klitschko losses. You know, the loss to Corey Sanders, to Ross Purity, to those sort of guys, you know. Fundamentally, if fighters make mistakes on the way up when they're young, inexperienced, eager to please the crowd, and if those mistakes for Tyson Fury cost him 2 knockdowns where he still won the fight, for me, that's not the biggest concern. If anything, he proved by those 2 incidents that he could take a shot, he could get hurt, but he still had the grit and the heart to keep fighting. And, you know, he could take a shot. He wouldn't get knocked out just because he got hit hard. So, my point of view is that someone like Kubrat Pulev, who consistently showed, you know, that he could be outboxed potentially by like a Tony Thompson, for me that's actually a bigger concern going into a Klitschko fight than the fact that Fury got dropped. The truth is, we know that Wladamir Klitschko has the power to hurt any heavyweight of all time if he hits them clean. Yeah, you could have the best chin out there, and if Wladamir Klitschko catches you clean, it could be game over. This is heavyweight boxing at a world level. Yeah, nothing is guaranteed, and no chin is guaranteed to take a Wladamir Klitschko right hand. So the truth is, the fact that Tyson Fury could get hurt by Wladamir Klitschko, if Wladamir Klitschko lands a classic Klitschko right hand on him, you know, what does that mean? I mean, that's irrelevant, isn't it? Yeah, Fury could get hurt, he could get dropped. So could you, so could I, so could any other man on this planet, so could any other heavyweight of all time in this planet. You know, so the fact that there's that question mark over Fury, for me, so what? Wouldn't that question mark be for everyone? You know, Povetkin and Pulev, you know, had never been dropped in fights as far as I know. Yeah, Pulev got decked a couple of times en route to an early stoppage. Povetkin, the Iron Chin Povetkin, got dropped how many times? 5 times, 6 times? You know, it's not necessarily about whether you've been down in fights or whether you've got a good chin. It's about other things. You know, David Haye didn't go down because he had the movement, because he had the elusiveness. Can a disciplined Tyson Fury bring that to the table? You know, look at the improvements Fury made from Derek Chisora 1 to Derek Chisora 2. Look at how often he got hit in Derek Chisora 1 compared to Derek Chisora 2. Now, of course, Klitschko is a different animal to Chisora, and Fury's going to need to improve again. But at least from Chisora 1 to Chisora 2, we're seeing Fury on an upwards trajectory, both skill-wise, but also discipline-wise. And that's key. That's key. My point is, when you look at what does an all-time great fighter need, and I'm not making this specific to the heavyweight division, what does an all-time great fighter have? Jab, inside game, outside game, punch variety, body punching, combination punching, ability to fight on the front foot, ability to fight on the back foot, discipline, ability to move, head movement, ability to defend a shot, to lean and to weave. Tyson Fury has a lot of attributes in his locker, a lot of attributes. And as a young, undefeated heavyweight, if he was to get this win, we could potentially be, as I say, a passing of the torch. We could be looking at a heavyweight champion for the next decade. We're looking at someone here who has the potential to be an all-time great. Now, if you designed the perfect fighter, they would have more power than Tyson Fury. Fury's not a light puncher. He's got a decent knockout ratio, but he isn't the destructive one-punch knockout artist of other fighters. For me, the job he did against Derek Chisora in his second fight was far better than the job David Haye did against Derek Chisora. It was a more professional, more clinical performance from Fury than Haye. But, we saw what an elite level power puncher did to Chisora in David Haye, knocking him spark out in the 5th round, compared to what Fury did, gradually wearing him down and making him quit. If you designed a perfect fighter, they would carry a little bit more power than Tyson Fury. Having said that, few would argue that Wladamir Klitschko was there or thereabouts on the all-time great scene. And he went the distance with Derek Chisora. He went the distance with Kevin Johnson. And numerous other fighters I could mention. Wladamir Klitschko, heavy-handed, big puncher, hurtful puncher, could get guys out of there, definitely. But probably not a one-punch knockout artist like Wladamir Klitschko. Like his brother, his younger brother. So there are concerns about Tyson Fury. Getting dropped early in his career is a concern. Not having elite level power isn't ideal. But these aren't concerns that at this point make me discount his upside. And his upside, is vast. The improvements are vast. The ability to keep improving at such a young age, is really there. And isn't it a frightening thought that we're looking at a man here who could still be 3-4 years off his peak? Isn't it a terrifying thought that he could improve, that he could have an extra 5-10% for the step up in class? How many more well-rounded heavyweights are there than Tyson Fury? How many better technical heavyweights are there than Tyson Fury? How many bigger heavyweights are there than Tyson Fury? How many guys are there in the heavyweight division who can move like Tyson Fury? How many guys in the heavyweight division are equally adept at fighting southpaw or orthodox like Fury? How many guys can fight on the inside and the outside like Tyson Fury? How many guys have rapid combinations where they change levels and go from the head to the body and back again? My point is, you'll find lots of heavyweights with good hand speed, lots of heavyweights with good movement, lots of heavyweights with good size, but Tyson Fury combines them all. Tyson Fury's got serious upside. And unlike Pulev, Povetkin and Haye, if Fury does get this job done, and it's a big if, he could be an all-time great. He could dominate the division for years to come. And by the time it hits 2030, he could be on people's top 10 heavyweights of all time. Let me know your thoughts. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, please do give me the thumbs up.